Joining us live now is the Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Marcus Hellyer, on this. Marcus, good morning. Thanks for your time. It's a pretty good bit of kit, that Bushmaster. And if we're sending a few of them over to Ukraine, what are the capabilities of them for those who don't know?
Okay, so Bushmaster is an Australian designed and made vehicle. We used it very, very successfully in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, where the threat was improvised explosive devices, so essentially improvised mines hidden under tracks, it's the perfect vehicle for that situation. So it's designed to resist a blast from below and protect the occupants. So a large number, maybe 30 or more Bushmasters were blown up in Afghanistan, yet not a single Australian soldier was killed inside a Bushmaster. So it's a great vehicle for that kind of purpose. It's not so good if you're trying to protect yourself against, say, a tank or an anti-tank missile, the kind of missile we've seen the Ukrainians use very effectively, and which we also know the Russians have of their own. So it's a good vehicle if you're using it for the purposes it was designed for, but it's not really a frontline fighting vehicle that you would use to take on tanks. But it's a useful contribution to the cause. And as we have a lot of them, we have probably, off the top of my head, sort of maybe 800 or 900 of them. So we certainly, I think, could come up with a few spare to send over to Ukraine. And as the Minister said, you could fit about 4 on a large transport aircraft. So if we made that a priority, we could have 20 or 30 of them there within a couple of weeks.
Okay, interesting. There are a few interesting angles when it comes to defence at the moment, and many of them are developing too. This Solomon Islands situation, it looks as though it's going to ink a deal with China. How much concern should we have about that, and why?
Well, it is concerning. So, again, we should avoid, the slippery slope nightmare scenario straight away. But the nightmare scenario has always been for Australian strategic thinkers that an external power, so in this case, obviously China, would establish a military base in the South Pacific, from which it could either project power directly against Australia or somehow block our lines of communication with our major ally, the United States. Now, we shouldn't immediately jump from this proposed deal, and what we've seen already at the moment just seems to be a draft. We shouldn't jump straight from there to thinking that overnight China is going to have ships and aircraft based in the Solomon Islands. But it is a very clear sign that Chinese influence is growing in the South Pacific. China is very interested in increasing its presence in the South Pacific. You might recall that a couple of months ago, a small Chinese flotilla of warships sailed through northern Australian waters on its way to do disaster relief in the South Pacific. So there is a growing presence there. And it is concerning, though what I would say it's not yet. We shouldn't jump to the nightmare scenario. So, we should be alert. And the Australian government, as we know, has this program that's been running for several years called the Pacific Step Up, which is to strengthen our relationships with South Pacific countries and try to convince them that we are a better, more reliable security partner for them than the Chinese.
Are we in danger of losing our sphere of influence in the region if China does manage to increase its presence primarily in Solomon Islands?
Well, I'd be careful about using the term sphere of influence because it tends to be a sort of term that people like Vladimir Putin, and the Chinese Communist Party use. And so I don't think we should describe our relationship with the South Pacific nations in that those terms. The Prime Minister has, been very emphatic in referring to our South Pacific family, and I think that's a better way of viewing it. So we should be, talking to the family and saying, what's the best way we can help you? What do you want from this relationship, and how can we provide that? But yes, we do have to accept that there is competition for that role, and another great power is trying to sort of become a member of that family as well. And we need to be aware of that. And, I think we're doing the right kinds of things, but we need to keep doing it. And one of the problems with our relationship with the South Pacific is we tend to be very involved for a few years and then we lose interest for a few years and realise that there's a gap there and we need to step up again. So we just need to maintain that focus.
Okay, Marcus Hellyer, good to have you with us this morning. Good to have your insight. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.